It's 1:30, so I'm going to start this public meeting. I guess IT's ready for me. Okay, so today we have one public hearing, the Figus fill removal and wetland restoration coastal development permit. And the recommendation is to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and approving with conditions. Since we published the notice, I received comments on the conditions from Catherine Ryan at California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and she requested adding that any supplemental planting necessary to meet success criteria be local, native, salt marsh species. And she wanted clarification that the final monitor report and any necessary supplemental restoration monitoring program be prepared by a qualified botanist or restoration specialist. And she wanted to clarify that any asphalt removed from the restoration area go to an authorized disposal facility. So I'm proposing to, I'm thinking we will amend the draft conditions of approval to clarify that, but I'm first going to open the public hearing. We have the applicants here. Do you have anything to say?
Not at this time. I got a couple of questions. Are we still with the city laying that back, or has this expanded, or is it still the same?
I think there's some inconsistencies with what was sent to us. I was down there this morning. The city's floodgate is not working. I took my transit level and I shot the bay side and I shot the ditch side, and it's the exact same level. That culvert's just allowing water to flow back and forth. And another thing is, like, if that is fixed properly, like, we don't have a problem removing the material, but if that's fixed properly, that shouldn't be a salt marsh. It should be more like a freshwater species mix, because that tide gate should keep all the salt water on the bay side. And that's the whole reason this whole thing started, is that failed tide gate.
Talking to CDFW staff and a man from NIMS, Brad Nissen, it was really the fact that tide gate operated was really critical to this fill removal moving forward.
Oh, it would, yes, help tremendously.
No, because if it didn't operate correctly, there could be tidewater gobies on your parcel now because of tidal water. And so then that might be problematic for removing fill next to that channel. Okay, so if you're saying that the tide gate doesn't operate,
it's not functioning as it should,
that,
in my opinion,
that throws a wrench in the approval of the fill removal as it's been without consultation with NIMS over the potential for tidewater goby in that ditch. Is there any way to isolate the ditch from tidal inundation while you're doing the fill removal work?
Yes.
Yes, that's what we did when we repaired it upon the city's request. We repaired it and we isolated it right in that ditch so it doesn't fluctuate into the property.
The whole issue.
So you're saying you've repaired the tide gate?
No, the tide gate's on the city of Eureka's side.
So when you say when we repaired it per the city's request, what are you referring to?
I don't know, you seem to be in, I got a call and the water was so high, I had 2 feet of water on my property. The city took the levee out, the floodgates in the levee. Now,
there was a second set of floodgates that got removed with the Elk River Estuary Enhancement Project.
on the city's
on
property.
the city's property.
So it was a nice project. Adam did the project, 114 acres. But when high tide comes and Elk River's running, it came right over and onto my property, into my buildings. And
Katie Marcelon took photos recently to show me how during high tide, when the Elk River Estuary Enhancement Projects flooded, that tide gate's closed.
It's closed, but it's not sealing. Like it's, how do I say this? It's functioning like to say 75% capacity. It's not, when the tide comes in, the floodgate is not fully sealing and water still, it's a big enough gap that water, it doesn't even slow it down. Whatever the bay side is, it is on our side. So if it's a 9-foot tide, the water's at 9 feet on our side.
Is there a way to do the fill removal that could it be done potentially like during a low enough tide?
Yes,
that
yes, we can.
Didn't have water in that ditch? Are there times when there's no water?
Yes, we can do all that, but what I'm getting at is we're gonna be right back to the same problem of every time a tide comes in, we're gonna have water coming into our buildings.
Lisa, did you share those? I brought some pictures when we first met. I showed you the pictures of the flooding.
And it not only
Did
affects
you share that with them?
our property, it affects the city of Eureka's property as well.
It was
I
on
mean,
the
it-
counter. I gave you some pictures to show you. My property was completely flooded and I showed it to you and I said, we got a call from,
It was so flooded, it was coming,
it went in the building.
it went in the buildings and it was coming in the city's,
Pictures away.
it was coming into the city's manhole system.
So the purpose of this CDP, I hear you. I feel like this, the
Yes,
purpose today where you've
yes.
applied for a CDP
Correct.
to remove fill to resolve a violation.
Correct.
And I'm trying to help you through that. I'm getting, we've been talking with these other resource agencies that are very interested
Mhm.
in this project. And so I'm just trying to get you to a place where we could say, hey, the violation's resolved and everybody can stop calling me about it. And
No, we appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
But I don't.
we want to see it,
Justin.
we want to see it done too.
are you comfortable removing the amount of fill that was placed? Okay,
This is the red.
Yes.
this red outline, because you can see in these photos, here, let me close the. Hold on. Like this little structure here, you can see it was wetland.
Well, you can see, because the tide gate isn't functioning. It's turned wet because of a non-functioning tide gate.
I could see how like there might have been more water in January 2022, but there was also that mapping that occurred prior to the restoration project that showed that this area was wetlands.
Yeah, if you go back far enough, it's just years and years of a non-functioning tide gate
And
that
you
has
created a
turned a field, an upland into a wetland.
Well, so it was originally wetlands, right?
Oh.
Like, yes, prior to any development on this site, prior to whenever the tallow works went in, this whole area was wetlands. So it easily returns to.
I mean, we don't know that. I mean, we can argue that.
I have like you have the 1870s coastal survey showing that this, right?
And that was an upland. That's why it was built there next to the railroad.
Well, like
Do the rent.
even in the 40s, you can see like this road existed and this was never paved on either side of it.
Wasn't paved, but there was 3 houses next to the railroad. There was an office where that car was. The building in the middle was the truck shop.
Right.
The cattle were grazing where you say is wetlands. The cattle and sheep were
Well,
grazing. I
Cattle
was
graze
there
in
as a boy.
wetlands. Yeah, cattle graze in wetlands all over Humboldt
But it
County.
didn't have wetland material. I mean,
I think we're
plans.
getting a little off.
Or like the argument is whether it was fresh water or salt water
We can,
because of the failed tide gate.
we can remedy our spot.
Yeah,
I guess we're asking if the city can remedy the culvert so we don't keep getting inundated in with every tide.
I mean, our intent was to fix that culvert as part of that Elk River Estuary project.
I offered Katie, I offered Miles, if they wanted to help participate, we could do it separately to help keep the cost down. The Figus Construction could donate their equipment and materials, and
It might already be covered under
An
that,
addendum?
that CDP and that environmental document. We might already have authorization to do that work. So
um,
I think that's a separate,
I agree.
Issue.
It's just when water's pouring in your front door twice a day, at what point do you, when you have the means to fix it, at what point do you solve the problem when it's not getting solved? That's kind of what this was.
So this
Yes,
is
I hear
this is
you.
how it came to a head.
I hear you, yeah.
This is how this came to a head. I was out of town. The city tried to, thank you for trying. The city tried to remedy it. They backed that ditch out. Then the road collapsed and exposed a 2-inch gas main, a 440 high voltage main, your utilities, and cars couldn't see the road and they went into the ditch. And that's when I got a call from the city saying, you need to take care, you need to help us take care of this. And that's when I called Adam and he came up, which he did the job just 20 feet away. He put the armor rock in, he dug the ditch out. Like you said, it was part of it should have been part of the other plan, but that's
On the
all he
city
did.
side, yeah.
Yeah, on the city side, all he did was take care of your problem on our side.
Well, yeah, by filling something that delineates as wetland, regardless of how long it's been a wetland, once it's a wetland, you can't just place dirt in a wetland without a permit. And that's where we're at right now. And
You're
we're just
asking
trying to,
remove that rock.
yes,
That's
the rock as
holding
well.
the material back, that's armoring the sides, which is gonna then erode back into the ditch, and we're right back to our problem we've been at for 40 years.
So are you
So
not,
We're saying we can take care of our side, and we would just appreciate if the city of Eureka can address the culvert so we don't have any more property damage.
But you agree it's a separate issue from the CDP
Yes.
today?
I mean, yes, it is a separate issue.
if I approve this, you're willing to move forward with the work as approved?
Yes,
Okay. Good.
I hope you can bear with our frustration sometimes. It's,
The rock was, specifically called out by the resource agencies as part of the fill violation. So it needs to be included. If I don't include that, this will definitely get appealed to the Coastal Commission and then you're dealing.
no, that's fine. I don't think we would have a problem as long as that tide gate is functioning properly. And it not only affects our property, it affects city of Eureka's as well. That ditch goes right on up into the city of Eureka's, and
The reason I'm not giving you a complete answer on that is because one, I need to make sure that it's covered by that previous permit. And number two, I don't have the authorization to say, yeah, we're gonna fix it. I'm not
I know.
Miles.
I hope you can feel our frustration.
Yeah, I hear you. Totally. Okay. So, is there any other, let me stop. Screen sharing, let me just check that there's, Mike Atkins, you're the only other person present. Would you like to speak during public comment period?
Mike helped us.
Excuse me? Yeah, just to let you know our role, we were asked to come in from the client to review the fill that was placed as part of the bank armoring that specific site. I was looking through the addenda that you guys sent out, and I'm trying to find, it didn't show the data on pit P2 or P3. There's a unique fill difference between those two sites. It's actually flipped. So I think the history of the site was it may have been graded, that larger site, but then there was fill flipped over on the site at the culvert location. Um, anyways, now that they've agreed to do a bigger project, I think it's can be folded in under our mitigations on the original project. Um, anyways, I just question. I guess what I really question about this is, and this is not specific to this project, but the quality of these wetlands are not very good, and so it appears that uh, there's a tremendous amount of uh, yes, there's an opportunity to improve them and make them better than they were, but looking at the site history and stuff, they weren't really great wetlands to begin with. They should be restored. Um, but I just think that this is pretty onerous. With that being said, if Bob's fine with agreeing with it, we'll support him and help him do the monitoring and the planting, not the planting, but the weeding. So we're fine with it.
Yeah, well, this site's been used for 100 years.
Right. Yeah, but
My-
under the coastal, we're dealing with finding consistency with policies, and under the Coastal Act and the city's local coastal program, a wetland is a wetland, and there's no distinction for the quality of the wetland. It's if it hits one of those three parameters, then the wetland policy applies that says you can only fill wetlands, grade or do anything in wetlands for only 7 things that are all like resource related or coastal dependent, like industrial or other or boating or whatever. So it's pretty irrefutable based on the photographs that the full area that we're asking for fill removal from was wet and was filled. There was soil added to that full extent. So I don't see any other way to resolve the violation other than requiring all that fill in that entire area to be removed. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I do have a question. I've done numerous of these restoration projects. As the site sits right now, do you consider that wetlands where the fill was placed?
Now that fill has been placed,
Even though the fill is in there.
it's probably still wet, yes.
Yeah, same material.
But that doesn't matter.
I know in other instances, other projects we have done, we have filled wetlands and said it is still going to be a wetland.
Correct. As part of a larger restoration project.
Correct.
You have that allowable use of wetland fill, which is restoration work to justify it.
Could we still call it, is it still a wetland? We'll still pull it out, but I didn't know if this was maybe another solution to both of our.
The only way you could add fill to these wetlands is if it was for a restoration purpose. So if somehow adding fill increased the quality of the wetland, like by creating that heterogenealogy, like of the broader area, but that's not the case, right? It's clearly the purpose is not for restoration purposes. So
I've got 2 questions.
Okay, I was just trying to, if it's still wet and maybe we went in and did a little planting to revive kind of some natives and whatnot.
This is a separate conversation to begin with, right? Let's just resolve this violation and move on.
Okay. Sounds good.
I think ultimately, she's providing a solution that's the easiest way for you guys.
I get it, but how do you think that's a wetland if she says the pipe's functioning, how is that brackish water getting on my side? But anyway, with that being said.
It may or may not be functioning. I believe you that it's not functioning.
Okay.
But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it's becoming wet. It could be becoming wet because we put a pipe directly on your field, but once it's a wetland under the Coastal Act, and the Coastal Commission won't see it any other way.
I got one last question.
Yes.
Sorry. At what right does a property owner have to drive onto his property with a road and then it's being eroded by?
You can repair and maintain your road.
Isn't that what we did?
No, I mean.
The road
you
was,
can't
you couldn't drive across it. It was
Repair
flat.
and maintenance under the Coastal Act is clearly defined to not include expansion of the thing to, so the road itself that's already filled, you, as long as you continuously repair and maintain it and don't let it become a wetland, you can keep that road, but you can't expand into the wetlands on either side to justify repairing and
But
maintaining.
repairing.
No
the road-
longer road repair and
What I'm
maintenance
asking
under the
is, can you
definition of
use
the
the
Coastal Act.
farmer to repair your road, to maintain your road?
That it's so complicated under the Coastal Act. This is why I would not buy a property like that's got wetlands on it in the coastal zone. You know, it's just a tough situation for developing, regardless of the zoning, because of the Coastal Act and LCP policies.
It was pretty bad. The road was gone. I mean, the city tried, but they failed at it.
Regardless, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to apply for a coastal development permit and get approved for it before you did the work. Even repair and maintenance adjacent to wetlands requires a coastal development permit. So probably a lot of stuff you're repairing and maintaining out there, like you should be getting permits for that you're not getting.
Aren't you, isn't the city of Eureka the permitting agency?
Yeah.
So when I get a call from the city to go down and repair that, isn't that? the
Yeah, it
goal?
needs to be covered. It needs to be covered by a permit. Because we don't have full control of what's happening in the coastal zone. We're permitting in partnership with the state. Like we're not independently doing these things down there. Like we have to,
Okay.
we'll get a call from the Coastal Commission if we allow something without a permit. It's not just us who's enforcing this on ourselves.
See my frustration.
Okay.
Yeah, moving
So
on.
if they,
Close the public
they-
hearing.
yeah, one other question. If they agree to this, does this then complete this issue? You've already addressed this with the agencies. They're fine with this remediation?
So I heard back from CDFW, and that's why I'm adding these little clarifications to the conditions of approval. And I heard back from NIMS and they were good with the conditions of approval. I haven't heard back from the Coastal Commission as to whether they're okay or not with the conditions of approval. They commented when we sent the referral, and we attempted to address their comments as best we could. The regional board responded that you might need a 401 permit from them to remove the fill. So we indicated that in the staff report. And then from us, before you can actually go about the work, there's one last permit approval, which is the grading permit. So that's a condition of approval. And so I am not certain at this point whether this will or will not get appealed, but I've done my best to address everybody's comments in the hope that it doesn't, so that the fill can get removed and we can move on. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and then I'm going to pull up my amended resolution to read it. Almost. I hereby adopt a resolution finding the project exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving the Fegus fill removal and wetland restoration project with the conditions of approval in the draft resolution, which are now modified per California Department of Fish and Wildlife recommendations to clarify that any supplemental planting necessary to meet success criteria for species composition consist of native, locally appropriate salt marsh species. The final monitoring report and any necessary supplemental restoration and monitoring program be prepared by a qualified wetland biologist, botanist, or restoration specialist, and any asphalt removed from the restoration area shall go to an authorized disposal facility. All right, and then I'm going to end that hearing. And now it's time for oral communications to provide the public an opportunity to address the director on any subject not appearing on the agenda. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the director cannot take action on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Are there any oral communications?
I will pass.
Not at this time.
I got nothing.
Do we?
Kristen, we have someone who just logged into the meeting.
Okay.
I think James might work for my,
Oh, just jumped off.
He's the
I think he
person
worked.
who prepared the report.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think James,
I think he's just listening.
he's part of our.
Okay.
prepared their report.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to end the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.